Hey everybody, it's the Epistemologers here today, and our topic is, we're kind of going to try to do a series, and part of that series is going to be sort of misconceptions that we see often on Twitter. So we think this would be fun, and our first misconception is monodimensional thinking. Wow, that's a mouthful. What is monodimensional thinking?
It's maybe a bad name. I don't know, but it's what I'm calling is sort of a way to contrast it with multidimensional thinking. And multidimensional thinking is really just about thinking through different systems of thought, being able to use logic on whatever, and you don't really have a preference so much for one idea or another. You just go through the motions of deduction on it.
It's
a tool, a skill.
It's thinking about all the possibilities and thinking through them all, right? So multidimensional thinking.
Yeah, so that's multidimensional.
Would be you're thinking through all of the possibilities. And it's a common mistake to just stick with your one thing and not really think of any of the other branching things, right? So, and that you see this with people who, it's common for people to not understand what you're saying, and this is a common cause of that, is because you're trying to explain a different mode of thought that they're not willing to really look at all, right? So in the QAnon community, you get people who are like, well, I don't believe in QAnon, and it's a fraud, it's a fake, and I have all these things that prove that it's a fraud and it's a fake. And they're not really willing to listen to any of the explanations of why it might not be a fraud or a fake.
Yeah. And sometimes they are just defending their own worldview a bit because they have been conditioned to recognize certain buzzwords almost and use them as identifying marks on their enemy. Mm-hmm. So they'll hear that you use the word. I don't know if I have a very good example at the moment, but they'll hear that they'll reduce your argument to just the buzzwords, and then they'll label you in their mind. You're a one of those,
Yep.
And then so they think they understand you.
Yes.
Because they've reduced your argument down to some model that they've got.
Well, great.
And then they think they know how to argue against that.
A great example of this is sort of the you used your attack any of the labels that you apply on people, where you're like, oh, they're a tax and spend Democrat, or they're a war hawk, right? Everything about them is war, and they might be offering or saying, no, we need to do a first strike in order to prevent this, and this will be a police action, blah, 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 right? But because you've heard that we want to do a military action, they're suddenly a war hawk, and you're just against anything that they do, even if it's intervention against a genocide. But
if you're the person that's trying to explain to them, it can be very difficult just to present a nuanced argument. If you happen to be kind of middle of the road between two positions, and they've heard they only hear the what they want to hear from what you're saying, so they've got you pegged wrong.
And this can happen. This can happen both positively. This can happen both positively and negatively, right? There can be people who will think that you're saying something in their favor of what they think, but you're really not, or vice versa, right? And so oftentimes this is because people don't practice thinking through, okay, what did this person say, and what could this really mean? What are they trying to convey? And when you start thinking like that, you start to try to understand what their arguments are. However, that being said, it's very easy once you start the practice of trying to understand what somebody is trying to say. You can run into a problem in which you have given them too much of the benefit of the doubt. You have translated it into your own words, and now they're saying what you want them to say. And that's also dangerous and bad.
Right. There's also other dangers or causes, I should say, from monodimensional thinking. Like sometimes we are interested in avoiding wasting our mental resources. So we will try to pick the right worldview. right? Like pretty early, we'll try to figure out we pick the right one, and then that means we don't need to waste our time looking at other ones.
Right.
And so this is always just an example of monodimensional thinking, because you've got yourself pegged into a corner for just the reason of not wasting resources. But the thing is that errors are inevitable in every idea, since no system of ideas can be perfect. So you basically adopt those problems wholesale,
right?
So you're kind of stuck, because you really do want to separate the baby from the bathwater routinely, but sometimes if you just don't, you just feel like you don't want to knock what you got, and so you just keep the water with the baby, and nothing ever changes. And that's bad, because it's stagnation.
Yes.
And this is the deeper problem with monodimensional thinking, is that it's an example. It's just a form of stagnation. You're not looking at what your next step could be. So, and we get a lot of these ideas from programming, philosophy, of course, mathematics. When we're writing software, it's very important to be able to think through all of the possibilities, because when you're writing the code, you want the code to handle those possibilities. And it doesn't matter if that possibility is unlikely, right? So it being unlikely in a computer programmer doesn't mean, basically you're just not handling the case if you use that as a reason to not program that. Right? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like,
you have to think of...
You got to handle every case.
Well, and on top of it...
Or you're going to have a bug.
On top of that, if you're looking for a solution to a problem, it's always good to have to think up a few solutions, simply because there are enough unknowns generally when you're heading into a problem that you don't know what's going to work. So if you have a few solutions, you can just iterate through them. And maybe one of them will work better than the others.
But the other point was that likelihood is used as a reason to think that this way of thinking is likely correct.
Right.
So I'm going to just stick with this. This other idea is possible,
but unlikely.
But it's not as likely. Yeah, so you're going to avoid thinking down that road. But essentially, the trap is you don't know what's likely until you understand the whole picture. And you don't understand the whole picture unless you go down that road.
Well, and you won't even understand the whole picture, the real whole picture, probably ever. Maybe in hindsight.
Well,
but
that's why we got to iterate.
There's so many variables that you might think that this is most likely, but it's really not. And the other thing that you think is unlikely, or is likely more likely than what you have.
I'm guessing that for each of these misconceptions we feature in this series, we're going to be able to tie it back to stagnation in some way.
Yeah.
It's a way to get yourself stuck in a rut.
I'm seeing that pattern too. Well, except for a few of them. There's a few of them that's not. But it'll be a nice common theme. How does it all tie to stagnation?
It might have some tenuous threads. We'll find out.
Well, I think that's a good stopping point.
I think so too.
Well, we were the Epistemologers. Please like, subscribe, comment what you think about our definition of monodimensional thinking. I think it's a little long. And have a good one.